Thank you.
Thank you. I'm supposed to remind you, if you haven't yet, to scan that so you can get one of the two books that are being offered. I'll just say up front, I've been a preacher most of my life. I started preaching at the age of 15, and every speech I've ever given has been in a theological environment, from a university to a church to a conference. So this is something brand new for me, so I appreciate you being here today. This is our topic today, Lead Forward, 5 shifts that build leadership, strong leadership culture in 2026. And we want to ask the question as we begin: if someone followed your leadership style for the next 5 years, who would they become? On October the 10th, 2011, almost 15 years ago, I lost my first wife and our second-born son to a double murder. The crime was committed by someone I knew and trusted, someone who was a part of the church that I served at that time. The betrayal was complete. The trauma was overwhelming, and the aftermath shaped my life in ways I never anticipated. As you might imagine, I didn't just grieve, I unraveled. I left leadership altogether. I walked away from ministry, swore I would never do that again, tried to start over in a completely different field, and I told myself very confidently that I would never, ever, ever take on a leadership or ministry role again. I was absolutely done. But life has a way of coming full circle, and God has a way of laughing at what you say you will never do again. And a few years later, I found myself back in a leadership role at a church, serving and guiding once again. And then about 5 years, maybe 6 years ago, while working full-time for a church, I decided to undergo intensive trauma therapy. Not to relieve the tragedy, but to make sure that I had really processed it well, that I could function well as a husband, as a father, and as a leader. At the end of that process, my therapist told me something that I never, ever expected. She said that I had handled the loss of wife and son in a remarkably healthy way, that I had moved forward, that I had done the work necessary to process and to be okay. Then she said something that took me completely by surprise. She said, "You have PTSD." Now, at that point, I assumed that came from earlier experiences, military service. Anybody here prior military? Anybody here got combat time? Yeah. I assumed that it came from something like that, or disaster response. We were right there in Gulfport for Hurricane Katrina and did disaster relief for a good couple years. And so I figured that was what it was going to be. But that's not what it was. She told me that my PTSD stemmed from years of exposure to unhealthy leadership. Not one specific moment, not one single person, but patterns of leadership over time. And the way I was led created patterns of anxiety that continues to be with me today. The pressure, the unpredictability, the lack of clarity, the fear of mistakes or missteps, all of that followed me home. So I want to ask you this question. How many of you have ever worked in an environment where you felt you had to stay on edge, always waiting for the next reaction? Yeah. Not uncommon, is it? How many of you have promised yourself that if you ever led people, you would never lead like that. That realization shifted my understanding of leadership. Because leadership isn't just about productivity. It's not just about results or strategy or performance. The way we lead people impacts them on a deeply human level. It influences their health, their confidence, their families, and their sense of safety and self-worth. What I learned is that leadership doesn't just influence outcomes, it shapes nervous systems. It teaches people what to expect, what to fear, and how guarded they needed to be. And over time, people quit reacting to their leaders. Instead, they start anticipating them. And maybe you know this, but anticipation can be absolutely exhausting. And that's why talented people burn out quietly, or teams sometimes lose their momentum. It's why people begin to doubt themselves, and none of it happens suddenly. It's not like something that, somebody snapped a finger and it was there. But it comes from patterns of leadership that were never questioned, never examined, or never changed. You ever heard the phrase, kicking the dog? No? I'm surprised. Thank you. It describes what happens when someone is mistreated at work. They carry that anger or hurt or frustration. They carry that home with them. The dog gets kicked. The family gets that version of that person who's been shaped by their boss and circumstances on the job. And then the next morning, they bring it all back. They bring it all back to work again. Harm, it spreads downstream from leader to employee to family and on to the next day and the team that you work with. Most leaders, they never see this kind of a cycle because it happens beyond their view, but it's real. And if you're aware, you might know that it's happening in organizations even now. Leadership is never neutral. It builds environments where people thrive, where it builds cultures they barely survive. It either brings clarity or confusion, trust or fear, energy or exhaustion. Most leaders never intend to hurt anybody. Nobody gets up in the morning and says, I'm going to have fun today. They're busy and under pressure, trying to deliver results, but good intentions, they don't limit the impact. They don't eliminate the impact. And that's why I believe leadership must move forward intentionally. And so before we go any further, I want you to do something. We're going to do a little exercise, just 60 seconds, and you'll do it in your own mind. I want you to think of someone you currently lead or have led. One person, somebody you currently lead or have led. I want you to think about that one person, and then I want you to write down one word that describes how you want them to feel about coming to work. Just one word. How do you want them to feel about you coming to work? I struggle with math, so I'll try to keep it. Do what?
About me coming to work or when they come to work?
When they come to work. How do you want them to feel about their job? Now, have you got that person in mind? You got that word in mind? Now I want you to ask yourself, is that the word they would choose about how they come to work? And if there is a gap, that's exactly what we're here to talk about. Lead Forward is built on 5 shifts, and they're not just theoretical. They're practical, observable, and essential for building environments that are healthy, sustainable, and effective over time. And each shift builds on the one before it. Miss one, and the next is harder. Build them in order, and it's kind of like interest. It compounds. It isn't about being perfect, but it is about being responsible. Because how you lead today, how you lead people now, influences who they become tomorrow. And that matters more than most of us know. So the first shift is intentionality. If leadership is never neutral, then culture is always intentional. Every organization has a culture. The only real question is whether that culture is being shaped on purpose or left to form on its own. Most leaders, they don't aim to create unhealthy environments. They don't come to work intent on causing anxiety or confusion or burnout. Most believe they're probably doing the very best they can under the pressures they serve under. And that's where culture generally starts to shift. Good intentions alone do not create healthy cultures. And culture, it isn't your mission statement. It isn't the values that you have listed on your website. It isn't what you teach a new employee in orientation. Culture is what happens when pressure appears, when deadlines slip, when mistakes happen, when conflict occurs, and priorities clash. Culture is shaped in the moments when leaders decide to speak up or stay silent. Culture quietly answers questions people rarely ask out loud. Is it safe to speak honestly here? I have an old habit from the military, permission to speak freely, sir. Is it safe to speak honestly here? What really matters when things get hard? Will I be supported or blamed if this goes wrong? Can I succeed here in this environment? And the way those questions get answered, even silently, even unintentionally, that's the difference between a leader who reacts and a leader who is intentional. A reactive leader responds to events. An intentional leader shapes those events. The distinction really sounds simple, but it isn't. Reactive leaders don't ignore culture. They just don't see it forming. They don't recognize that it's happening. Every unguarded moment, every pressured response, every problem that goes unaddressed, it's all building something, whether they know it or not. But an intentional leader, they see those kind of moments differently, not as interruptions, but as opportunities. One time, a long time ago, I was working at a building supply company, and Alcorn State University had ordered a whole bunch, like 100 door units, and I was in charge. And I took their order, sent it to the door shop. All those doors were built. I failed to ask a question the right way. That door order was shipped out, and rather quickly that door order was shipped back. It was all wrong. It's a huge amount of money. You don't make a lot of money on state contracts anyway. I got called to the boss's office. I heard my name over the loudspeaker system. Les Ferguson, come to Mr. Burnett's office. I got there, sat down, and he said, "What happened?" And I told him my mistake. And he said, "Okay." I sat there a minute, and I said, "Okay? That's it?" He said, "Well, you want me to yell and scream?" No. He said, and then he stopped and he said, "Listen, son," he said, "here's my philosophy. Any day you make a mistake and you don't learn from it, any day you make a mistake and you don't learn from it is a day I don't need you working for me. Did you learn anything?" "Absolutely." He said, "Good job." Well, let me make this personal. When pressure hits your organization, what does your team learn about from watching you? If they imitated your tone under pressure, would that help your culture or would it hurt it? Ask yourself, how do I respond when something goes wrong? What tone do I use when I'm under pressure? What behavior do I address immediately? What do I quietly ignore or let slide? When someone brings me bad news, do they leave clearer or more anxious? Those moments will teach more than any vision statement ever will. Most leaders assume that culture is built in the big decisions. It isn't. Culture is built in the repeated ones, the small responses, the patterns, what gets corrected and what gets a pass, whether leadership is consistent or whether everything depends on mood and urgency. Here's the part that I find hard to sit with. Your culture is already answering those questions, not based on what you intend, but based on what you do. When a high performer repeatedly crosses relational lines and no one says anything, the culture learns that results matter more than respect. When a toxic attitude keeps getting excused, it learns that behavior is negotiable under pressure. When poor conduct is met with silence, it learns that values bend when things get hard. Culture work, it's personal before it's organizational. You shape it through presence, response, and restraint, not policy. Here's the principle that I keep coming back to, and I hope you will take this home with you today if you take nothing else. Get curious before you get corrective. Before you respond, take the time to understand. Before you push back, listen. See if there were circumstances that you had no idea about. Find out what the context was. Before you correct someone, try to see what it is that they're really carrying that day. Intentional culture building starts with the decision that's made long before pressure arrives. How will we handle mistakes? What behaviors are non-negotiable? What will never be acceptable, even when results are strong? What or who do we want to be when things go wrong? The most uncomfortable question a leader can ask is this: what am I allowing or doing that's teaching my culture something that I never intended? Here's the paradox. When culture is shaped on purpose, leadership gets easier. Fewer fires, less drama, more ownership, more self-correction. You don't need a new title or more authority to change culture. You just need to be aware, because you're shaping culture every day, whether you realize it or not. The only question is, are you doing it on purpose? And so the second shift that builds on that is clear expectations. Once leaders get intentional about culture, the next thing that shows up is clarity. Most leadership problems don't come from poor attitudes or lack of effort. They start with unclear expectations that leaders assume everyone already understands. And that assumption, you know the old saying, what happens when you assume? That assumption is one of the most expensive habits in leadership. Leaders often expect people to already understand their values, priorities, and standards without ever expressing them clearly. But assumptions aren't communication, and that confusion starts out subtle, and then it gets painful. Most people want to do good work. They want to meet expectations. They want to contribute meaningfully. But people can't hit a target they can't see, or one that's constantly moving and shifting and reshaping. Clear expectations aren't about control. They're about respect. Leaders are usually clear about results, but vague about conduct. They know what they want to achieve, but they haven't defined how are we going to handle conflict? How are we going to give feedback? How are we going to maintain our professionalism under pressure? Or what behavior will never be acceptable regardless of how good your results are. When behavioral expectations aren't clear, leaders end up reacting instead of responding. Conversations get emotional instead of factual. Accountability starts to feel personal, like an attack instead of being based on principle. When behavioral expectations aren't clear, problems are going to arise. But clarity, it gives leaders the ability to say, this doesn't align with what we agreed about. This doesn't align with what we said matters. And that distinction protects dignity, it sustains trust, and it keeps conversations focused on growth instead of blame. Leaders often misread why their teams hesitate. Why won't someone take initiative? But the real issue isn't most likely motivation, it's permission. People hesitate when the boundaries are unclear. They hold back when expectations are unspoken. And when expectations aren't clear, three things tend to happen. People choose what feels safest instead of what offers the most value. Leaders, in turn, feel overwhelmed because their teams, their people keep referring or deferring decisions back to them. And accountability, it becomes emotional rather than objective. And feedback, well, it feels like an attack. Clarity builds confidence. It answers the questions people are afraid to ask. What does winning look like here? What matters most when priorities clash? What decisions can I make on my own? When expectations are clear, fear goes down, confidence goes up, momentum builds because people aren't guessing anymore. They're not left to wonder. They know. One of the most overlooked benefits of clarity is that it reduces emotional noise. It replaces assumptions with understanding. It replaces defensiveness with direction. Clarity doesn't require more meetings. Anybody here needing a verse? We're going to have this meeting to decide how to deal with this issue, and that issue gets resolved, and guess what it leads to? Another meeting about the next issue. Clarity doesn't require more meetings. It just requires better conversation. Let's talk. Let's get to know our people. Let's understand who they are, where they're coming from, what their context is. And that leads us to the third shift. And that shift is trust. This next shift here is where leaders often hit a wall. Without trust, leaders almost always reach for control. And most folks don't do it out of a sense or desire for power. They do it because they're overwhelmed, and as long as you can control something, it feels a little bit more manageable. And when pressure arises, control, well, it can seem like the safest way to maintain structure and get results. I want to share this with you today. This is another one of those things you can take home with you. But control is not the same as leadership. Control often begins with good intentions. When a mistake occurs, the leader steps in to keep it from happening again, and maybe we have another meeting or set up another rule. If a deadline is missed, oversight gets a little bit tighter. If a decision fails, layers of approval go up, and the dreaded rules multiply. At first, all of this seems to work. Problems get handled. Risks feel reduced. Leaders feel like they have regained order. But over time, control becomes a bottleneck. Initiative fades, growth stalls, independent thinking disappears, and eventually the leader has become the very bottleneck they never intended to create. Trust is a choice. Trust is a choice. It's built on the belief that responsibility grows when you're willing to share authority. Trust moves people forward. Control holds them back. Trust works best when expectations are clear and people have freedom to operate within them. Many leaders would hesitate with trust. They're worried that maybe their trust might get abused, that standards will drop, or people might default to whatever is comfortable. But trust doesn't eliminate accountability. Trust grows it. Trust strengthens it. When people know they're trusted and responsible, ownership increases, confidence grows, and initiative, it improves. When trust is missing, a cycle begins. Leaders grow more frustrated. People become more cautious. People are underutilized. And over time, trust erodes in both directions. Think about that. If you don't trust me, guess what? I'm probably not going to trust you. There's going to be some struggle there. My mom used to say, bless her soul, she used to tell me all the time, you catch more flies, y'all know that saying, with honey than you do with vinegar. She wasn't talking about being soft and easy and a pushover. She was talking about what really works. You see, honey, or genuine trust and clear expectation and consistent respect, it builds something that is strong. But vinegar, what I would call control or unpredictability or suspicion, you might get some short-term compliance. You might get that order out in time, but it gradually destroys the people and the culture that you need. Here's the paradox that all leaders face. Control feels safe, but it limits growth. Trust feels risky, but it multiplies leadership. Multiplies leadership. And when you make that shift, you don't give up authority, you expand it. And that expansion is what makes this next shift possible. Sustainable leadership. When leaders start trusting their people, pressure doesn't automatically go away. Sometimes it might even go up. Here's something I've had to learn personally the hard way. People will mirror their leader's tempo. If you're running on fumes, they feel it. Burnout doesn't just stay with one person, it spreads. And here's what's easy to ignore when you're in the middle of it. Energy is finite. Your energy is finite. Their energy is finite. You might can push through for a short season, but you can't outrun it forever, and neither can your people. Neither can your people. When there's never any room to breathe, stress starts to crowd out good judgment. Anybody here ever feel stress? Have you ever made some really poor decisions in the middle of your stress? I'm the king. In the Bible, the Apostle Paul said he was the chief of sinners, and I often have laughed and said, move over, Paul, I'm here now. But I am the king of making bad decisions under stress. Stress crowds out good judgment. Exhaustion replaces creativity. Everything becomes about right now, in this moment, at this time, in this situation, in this obstacle, in this circumstance. Everything becomes about right now. And the future, that's off in the future, and we can ignore it for the moment. People stop being people you're leading, and they start feeling like problems you have to manage. And let me just tell you, when you start feeling like your people are problems to be managed, it's going downhill and going downhill fast. That last one really matters. When people have to be managed, at least you feel that way, something important, and it's already been lost. Healthy cultures don't drain people dry. Healthy cultures don't drain people dry. They create enough space for people to do their best work and still have something left over at the end of the day. Y'all heard the phrase, the tyranny of the urgent? Under pressure, what gets your attention? What's urgent? What's important? I want you to be honest with yourself. How many of you feel like you spend more time on fires than in the future? Yeah, a few of you understand, yeah, or at least a few won't, are willing to acknowledge. When the urgent takes over, everything feels critical. Firefighting becomes the job, and leadership starts turning transactional. You start looking at people and you think, what can you do for me today? What did you do for me today? What can you deliver for me right now? And that's the kind of environment that might survive for a season, but it will not thrive. So here's the question, another one you might think about and take home today. What kind of culture, where you work, among the people you lead, at home with your family, what kind of culture are you building? One that barely survives or one that truly thrives? Sustainable leadership. It isn't about avoiding hard conversations or difficult decisions. Pressure can drive results, but sustainability is what helps people keep going. A sustainable leader doesn't just look at the next deadline. They're constantly thinking about capacity, about health, about longevity, because burned out, stressed out people cannot build a strong future. When sustainability, start looking at your people as something to be nurtured, something to be grown, people to be helped. When sustainability becomes a part of how you lead, your trust will compound, your clarity will hold, and people stay committed for the long haul. And that sets you up for the final shift. Hey, does anybody ever like to get out of church early? You're going to get out of here early. When leaders learn to intentionally shape culture or clarify expectations or trust their people and lead sustainably, two questions naturally arise. What will my legacy be, and what culture will I leave behind? Most leadership, most focused on what's immediate, quarterly results, on-time deadlines, visible wins. Results matter. I agree, you agree, right? Results matter. But leadership that only focuses on short-term gains sacrifice what matters most in the long run. Legacy leadership, it plays the long game. It's not just about today's results. It's about what people learn along the way, what they carry forward, how they grow, how the culture keeps growing long after the leader has moved away, gone. Years after whatever business cycle they were in, whatever project they were involved in, people rarely recall specific metrics or strategies. They remember how they grew, what they learned, and how they were treated when it matters most. Legacy, it's built in ordinary moments. Short-term leaders focus on results. Legacy leaders invest in people quietly, consistently, over time. Not in dramatic moments, but in everyday conversations, in everyday decisions, in everyday interactions. Legacy is built in those conversations we have with a struggling team member, even when you're already overwhelmed. It shows up in the decision not to cut corners when pressure is high and no one would notice. It lives in how you respond when someone brings you bad news. It's in the credit you give when you really didn't have to. And it's in the moment you are willing and able to say, I was wrong, and mean it. Each of those moments becomes a building block in someone's foundation. Years from now, something you are doing or guiding or saying today, years from now, they'll remember that, and it will be reflected in their life. Your influence will be remembered. Your influence will be known, for better or for worse. Legacy leadership is the idea that every single day you are creating something. You are creating something. The question is what you are creating good or bad? And so as we close it up, I need you to know, again, that leadership is never neutral. I'll get it to go here in a minute. There we go. Lead forward isn't about perfection. It's about being intentional. It's about building a culture of clarity, trust, sustainability, and legacy. None of us are going to lead without mistakes. But all of us lead with influence. And influence always leaves a mark. Long after roles change, titles fade, and people move on, they remember how leadership made them feel and who they became because of that leadership. The question isn't whether your leadership will influence people. The question is how. And that question is answered every day. That's what leadership is about. And that's the reason to lead forward. I'm going to be a little bit open here. When I think about the years I spent under leaderships that left scars, and the years I've spent trying to heal from them, what I carried with me was not the hard work, it was not the long hours, it was not the pressure. What I carried with me, wrestle with today, is the feeling of not being safe, of never knowing what's coming, of never being quite sure or certain if I was valued or just useful for the moment. That's the mark of poor leadership. And this is what effective leadership leaves behind. People who believe in themselves because someone believed in them first. Teams that hold each other accountable because they were shown what accountability without shame looks like. Organizations that outlast the people who created them because their culture is strong enough to sustain itself. That's the legacy of intentional leadership. So I want to ask the question again. If someone followed your leadership style for the next 5 years, what would they become? Let's lead forward together. Thank you.
Can you put the scan code back up? Okay. If you haven't scanned and entered for the drawing, please do that while you miss out.
Thank y'all for being here. This was a first for me. You've been a great audience.
Great. And I am so thankful that you had the opportunity and the heart to turn something so tragic and so heartbreaking into a way that leaves other people better than you found them. And we really, really appreciate you coming and spending your time with us. We appreciate all of you for coming and joining us. I was taking to heart, and I'm so sorry that Pam could not be here. I know a lot of you know Pam Swain here in the room, and if you haven't, please make an opportunity in your day to make that happen. But when you think about leadership and intentional leadership, she has poured over 2 decades into this chamber and into this organization. And when I go out in the community with her, and people are literally jumping over cars to hug her neck, it is an amazing thing. And there are nights when I'm like, I'm going to spank your tail in the morning because I know you didn't get home till 9:30 at night. She pours into this community and this chamber, into so many people that have no clue. So I love that I get to mirror and work alongside excellent leadership, because I've only been here 7 months and she's changed my heart and my life in so many ways. So thank y'all for continuing to come. This organization is by far one of the greatest things I've ever been a part of, and I don't want you guys to miss out on any of that as well. So please be sure that you guys come, bring a friend. We will build room, we will build bigger tables. We'll figure it out. But just continue to come and continue to be involved. There's more happiness to this. We won't hold you much longer because I know y'all have a busy day. But we're gonna let you pick a number between 2 and
if I can answer any questions, don't feel free to ask.
And I need whatever publications you have, I need it.
Okay.
Even if you don't win them, you want them.
Yes, if I don't win it, I will give you my credit card and my cash, whatever.
I happen to have books in my trunk.
Does he need a number or a name?
No, he doesn't need to see it.
Oh, sorry.
I'm not reading it anyway.
He can't see, I can't read that. He just needs to choose a number.
He just needs to tell us no.
Okay.
5.
Okay.
That's for one of the books.
This laptop is complete opposite of what mine does. Gracious. Hang on. 5 is L.A. Griffin. Is that email? Yay! Yay! Okay.
So, I'm not doing Maxwell book. What is the, second number? Give me another number.
What's another number, sir?
18.
You mean in the back, sir?
Yeah.
Frank, hold on. Frank Wood. Did he leave? Yay! Oh, good. Sorry, I saw that when he pointed behind me that the seat was empty. My apologies. I know Frank. Awesome. Can I be Frank too when you're done with that book?
Charlie?
Make it 12.
Yeah, good question. Les, got a second? In leadership, when you're talking about how to basically create culture through decision making and how you respond, any advice or recommendation on how many layers of people you can work at one time in order to change that? In other words, if you've got 100 employees, how much time can you spend with, or how big should your management be, or direct, direct responders to you, or people you're working one-on-one with? How many of those can you do? Do you think an average person can work with in order to have that type of effect before they have to count on them to have the same effect on the next group?
That's a good question.
Jesus chose 12 men.
Yeah.
That's good. I've never heard that before. I like it.
But it compounds. You know, it compounds. So if you start with one and then set them free to do the same thing, it's going to grow. You know, once you set them free, grab another. Pour into them.
We just took a leadership something at our organization, and they did a good point of like your 5 people, right? Or like who, even if you run multiple organizations. So my brain goes like the person who's running boots on the ground there, that's who you pour into, and you make sure that person is so solid that they're gonna pour into your business. so that they're gonna take care of it like you would because you've been pouring into them so well. Does that make sense? Like, I would be like, who runs my bar, who runs my gym, who runs my,
Yeah.
that, and that one person is your one person that you pour into.
I think it's important to, because you may have people in your organization, they may not have a leadership title, but they have influence with other people. And so those are the people you notice and you pick out and you kind of feed into them and allow them to spread it out. That makes sense.
Yeah, cool.
Also, if you haven't gotten one of those little bags that the ladies put together, it's got a packet of seeds, zinnia seeds. And, you know, plant those seeds and think about those as leadership and help people grow. Thank you again.
If y'all want one,
We don't do it, so what it is. But now, we're starting another company actually. So we're gonna
I'm an introvert by nature.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic. I really enjoyed the sermon. It was great. I was going to read the book.
I'm gonna tell you, it's rough.
I mean,
It's rough at first.
I could.
It's got my story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to kind of run through that. I was just thinking about, I've got 10-year-old boys and